Imagine two people entering a luxurious hall filled with influential figures. The first one wears ordinary clothes, walks unhurriedly, and looks around without being noticed. The second, however, carries a different aura. Her gaze has an enigmatic glow. Her clothes have a subtly provocative detail. Her silence is loaded with meaning. Within minutes, all eyes are on her. What makes one person forgetful and another person magnetizing? You can say it's beauty, charisma, or status, but the truth, the real truth, is different. Whoever controls perception controls the game. We live in the age of information, but also of overexposure. The internet has made everything accessible and, ironically, disposable. Raw reality has lost its shine. Ordinary people go unnoticed. The world doesn't want the truth, it wants a show. You want narratives that enchant, figures that hypnotize, myths that inspire, and if you still believe that authenticity alone is enough to be recognized, you've already lost before you even started. Throughout history, the great masters of seduction and power have understood this perfectly. Napoleon knew that his image as an unbeatable leader was worth more than any army. Marilyn Monroe mastered the mystery of her presence to the point of becoming an archetype of femininity. Elon Musk, despite his eccentricity, has shaped his own legend as a visionary genius. They understood something that most people ignore. People don't fall in love with harsh realities, but with well-constructed fantasies. And this is where we enter Mahari's story. A woman who, despite her common origins, completely reinvented herself and became a living legend. But what made her so irresistible? The fantasies she created. She wasn't just a dancer. She was an enigma, a myth, a walking story that people wanted to unravel. This brings us to an essential question. If an ordinary woman from the past managed to transform her identity into something legendary, what stops you from doing the same today? The answer lies in what you are about to learn. The world does not want the truth. It wants a spectacle. In this video, we'll dissect the power of fantasy, understand how the greatest minds in history have manipulated perceptions, and most importantly, how you can apply these principles to your own life. Stay until the end and see the power this knowledge will have on your future. If people really wanted the truth, politicians wouldn't need fiery speeches, companies wouldn't spend billions on advertising, and influencers wouldn't fabricate unrealistic lifestyles to maintain followers. But the reality is different. The world prefers a well-told illusion to a dull reality. The pure truth is hard, cold, raw. Fantasy is captivating, seductive, irresistible. And this is not an anomaly of our digital age, it has always been this way. Since the earliest civilizations, those who knew how to transform reality into a spectacle dominated the masses. The Egyptian pharaohs were not just rulers, were living gods. Caesar was not just a general, was a legend in the making. Even religious figures such as Moses and Jesus not only taught, but created narratives laden with symbols and myths that transcended generations. The show has always been the ultimate tool of control. But what has changed in recent centuries? Simple. The speed at which fantasies are created and destroyed. The digital age has brought about a curious phenomenon. If before a myth took decades to consolidate, today celebrities are created in a matter of days and forgotten in weeks. Overexposure kills the aura of mystery, and when the public sees too much, it loses its charm. The side effect of this is that we are surrounded by empty fantasies, illusions that come and go like smoke. This leads us to a fascinating paradox. We live in the age of transparency, but we have never been so obsessed with fantasies. Social media exposes every detail of personal life, but instead of bringing people closer to the truth, it has created a competition for who has the most engaging illusion. What matters is not what you are, but what you appear to be. And this explains why many fall into the trap of naive authenticity, believing that being genuine is enough to gain attention and respect. This just doesn't work. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche understood this dynamic before anyone else. He said that human beings cannot bear the weight of reality and therefore create narratives to give meaning to life. According to him, lies are necessary for the truth to become bearable. This concept explains why great figures in history became immortal not because of their deeds, but because of the mythology built around them. Napoleon was not just a military leader. He was a symbol of ambition and genius. Marilyn Monroe was not just an actress. but an archetype of eternal seduction. And that's exactly what most people are missing. Understanding that in the social game, fantasy is not an option, it's a necessity. Have you ever noticed that mysterious people attract more interest? Or that those who master the narrative of their own lives seem to have more magnetism? This is no coincidence. The psychology of perception explains that our brain is programmed to fill in gaps. When we see someone with an aura of mystery, our mind automatically creates grand assumptions about that person. And that's where fantasy becomes a powerful weapon. The entertainment industry exploits this to perfection. Hollywood doesn't just make movies, creates modern myths. Technology companies don't sell products, sell visions of the future. Designer brands don't sell clothes, they sell status, belonging, admiration. What do all these narratives have in common? They understand that the real value of something is not in what it is, but in the story that is built around it. And here we come to a crucial point. If everything is a narrative, those who do not control their own are doomed to be just spectators in the theater of life. You can ignore this reality and continue to be just another face in the crowd, or you can understand that fantasy is not an escape, but an instrument of power. But how do you transform an ordinary life into something irresistible? How to build a personal myth that makes you stand out and attract attention? The answer lies in the story of a woman who mastered this art. Mahari. Mahari entered the stage as a living goddess. His gaze was mesmerizing. His movement seemed like secret rituals of a lost civilization. The audience, made up of Paris intellectual and aristocratic elite, could not take their eyes off it. Desire and curiosity mixed into an almost religious fascination. Who was that woman? Where did it come from? What mysteries did he hide? Was she an exiled Indian princess? A priestess of a forbidden culture? What no one knew, and what Mahari would never allow anyone to discover, was that behind her mystical persona, there was just an ordinary woman named Margaretha Zell, born in the Netherlands. Margaretha's transformation into Mahari was no accident. It was a meticulous construction. She knew her real story would not spark interest. Just being a penniless European trying to make a living as a dancer wouldn't get her anywhere. But a woman shrouded in mystery, dressed in exotic attire and carrying symbols of a distant culture, this created an irresistible fantasy. She understood the fundamental principle of social magnetism. People do not fall in love with individuals, but with what those individuals represent. What Mahari did was nothing new. Since ancient times, leaders and influential figures have created myths about themselves to increase their power. Alexander the Great encouraged the belief that he was a direct descendant of the gods. Napoleon allowed portraits to show him as an almost supernatural being. In the modern era, artists and celebrities follow the same path. David Bowie wasn't just a singer, he transformed himself into mythological characters. Elon Musk is not just an entrepreneur, he cultivates the image of a visionary who shapes the future of humanity. The personal myth is not an exaggeration, it is a strategic necessity. But what makes a personal myth work? 3 essential elements: exclusivity, mystery, and symbolism. Uniqueness means that your story needs to have something that sets it apart from all the others. Mahari was not just a dancer. She was the only one who brought an exoticism that no one else offered. Mystery means that not everything can be revealed. The more unanswered questions you leave hanging, the more people project their own fantasies onto you. And symbolism means you need to create visual and narrative elements that reinforce your image. In Mahari's case, it was her clothing, her movements, and her enigmatic gaze. Now, the important question: how can you apply this to your own life? Most people make the mistake of believing that all they need is talent or charisma to stand out. But in the world of perception, reality matters less than how it is presented. The key is to build an identity that is memorable, intriguing, and above all, magnetic. This involves everything from the way you dress to the way you tell your own story. But be careful. Creating a personal myth does not mean inventing a lie. It means amplifying what already exists within you and presenting it in the most powerful way possible. You need to transform your features into symbols. If your presence is strong, make it a trademark. If your mind is brilliant, surround it with an aura of genius. If your personality is provocative, use that to generate mystery. Great figures are not just people, they are living archetypes. The biggest mistake anyone can make is to be overly transparent. Mahari never revealed who he really was because he knew that the moment he did, he would lose his power. Human beings desire fantasy. When something becomes completely explainable, it loses its magic. And in the game of social magnetism, losing your magic means becoming irrelevant. This brings us to the deeper question of this video. How do you control how others perceive you? The answer lies in the strategy of the great illusionists. If the world prefers fantasy to reality, then true power belongs to those who know how to manipulate perceptions. And no one did it better than the great illusionists, not the stage magicians, but the strategists who understood that what matters is not what you are, but what people believe you are. Take any major historical figure and analyze it in depth. You'll see a pattern. They not only built an image, but they knew how to keep it intact, regardless of the circumstances. Mahari lived and died in his own myth. Napoleon used his height, considered a weakness, to his advantage, projecting his presence so that he seemed larger than he was. Steve Jobs, even though he wasn't a brilliant engineer, cultivated the aura of creative genius and made people believe he had a magical touch over technology. The secret? They have mastered the game of perception. Whoever controls history controls reality. This means that you should never allow others to define who you are. Create and repeat your own version of the fantasies until it becomes true for the audience. That's what great leaders do. They don't let the media define their image. They actively shape it. Mahari didn't wait for people to decide whether she was exotic. She introduced herself as a mystical entity before they could question her. This applies to any level of life. In the workplace, it is not enough to be competent. You need to make sure people see you as someone indispensable. In social life, you can't just exist. You need to project an identity that is remembered and respected. The majority's mistake? They let the perception of them be something organic, rather than strategically planned. The human brain processes images much faster than words. That's why symbols, clothes, and gestures are more powerful than long speeches. Think of figures like Salvador Dali with his surrealist mustache, Karl Lagerfeld with his sunglasses and impeccable suit, or even politicians who always dress the same way to reinforce a solid identity. These details become part of the myth. Mahari did this perfectly. His garments were not just clothes, they were symbols. Her jewelry was not an accessory, but an emblem of a mysterious past. His gaze was calculated to seduce without revealing. Aesthetics, when used well, becomes impenetrable armor. You can change your posture, the way you dress, and the visual elements people associate with you to completely transform the way others see you. Nothing is magnetic without contrast. What makes a strong leader? Your ability to appear unshakable in the midst of chaos. What makes an artist stand out? His eccentricity in the face of normality. What makes someone seductive? The combination of calculated distance and accessibility. Everything that is powerful in human perception is based on creating a game of opposites. Take the case of Elon Musk. He alternates between the role of a visionary CEO and that of an eccentric and unpredictable figure. This contrast makes it unpredictable and therefore fascinating. Look at fashion figures like Coco Chanel, who broke feminine standards of the time by mixing simplicity and elegance with masculine features. Contrast is impact, and impact creates magnetism. Knowing that the world lives on fantasies is one thing. Using this to your advantage is another matter entirely. Most people continue to believe that charisma is a natural gift, that magnetism is an innate quality, when in fact, all of this can be built and strategically shaped. You don't have to be born with a strong presence for people to notice you. You need to know how to manipulate the right elements so that your presence becomes impossible to ignore. The first step? Create your personal narrative. Who do you want to be in the eyes of others? What myth do you want to build about yourself? People who don't define this become hostages to other people's perceptions. Someone might look at you and see just another ordinary professional, another face in the crowd. But if you know how to tell your story in an intriguing way, you define how it will be perceived. Look at great personalities. They all have a well-defined narrative. Muhammad Ali wasn't just a boxer, he was the greatest of all time. Salvador Dali was not just a painter, he was surrealism itself in human form. This was not luck or chance, it was construction. Choose one powerful idea about yourself and reinforce it in everything you do. The second step, refine your aesthetics. The way you present yourself visually communicates more than any speech. If you want to be seen as sophisticated, your style needs to reflect that. If you want to be perceived as dangerous, your body language needs to convey dominance and unpredictability. Small details make all the difference. Mahari understood this and created an unmistakable aesthetic. Think about what elements could become your trademark. The third step, control your mystery. A fatal mistake many people make is exposing themselves too much, revealing every detail of their lives as if they need constant validation. But the more predictable you are, the less interesting you become. Mysterious people arouse curiosity because our brains are programmed to fill in gaps. If you tell everything about yourself, you eliminate the space for others to project fantasies onto you. The key here is to give enough to fascinate, but never enough to exhaust the mystery. And finally, the fourth step, create rituals and symbols. Impactful people are never random. They have rituals that reinforce their image. A leader can always enter a room last to create a sense of importance. An artist can always carry a unique item so that his or her presence is immediately recognized. Small, repeated habits become symbols, and symbols build myths. The power of fantasy is not just in understanding these rules, but in applying them consistently. The world does not reward those who just exist. He rewards those who know how to manipulate their own image. Now the question remains, what myth will you create about yourself? The world does not belong to the most talented nor to the most intelligent. The world belongs to those who know how to shape perceptions. History has proven this countless times. Mahari was not the best dancer of her time, but she was the most fascinating. Napoleon was not the greatest military strategist in history, but he built the image of an unbeatable leader. Steve Jobs wasn't a genius engineer, but he projected himself as an indispensable visionary. What did they all have in common? The ability to transform fantasy into power. Throughout this video, we saw how reality alone is not enough. The world wants myths, it wants spectacle, it wants stories that awaken emotion. Anyone who doesn't understand this becomes invisible. Whoever masters this art becomes unforgettable. You can choose to be just another one of the crowd, or you can use the strategies you learned here to shape your own legend. Now the question you need to ask yourself, how do people see you today? Were your image and your narrative constructed by you or by others? If you don't control your perception, someone else will do it for you, and most of the time it won't be in your favor. It's time to rewrite this story. Start small. Adjust your posture. Reevaluate how you present yourself to the world. Create symbols that reinforce your identity. Master the art of mystery. Build a personal myth that arouses curiosity and respect. And above all, never reveal everything. Fantasy is not a cheap trick. It is a powerful tool that, when used correctly, can transform your reality. The game of power is not about who speaks the loudest, but about who knows how to be remembered. And now that you know the rules, there is only one choice left. Will you apply them, or continue to be just a spectator of your own life? Be honest. Have you ever felt that no matter how hard you try, no one truly sees you? It's not about lacking value. It's about knowing how to make it visible. The social game isn't fair. If you don't know the rules, you're left behind, but you don't have to stay invisible. In the Anti-Weak audiobook, I share 22 strategies to master interactions, gain respect, and step out of the shadows. Click the link in the description now and start the transformation only you can make happen.